The dust clung to Clara Owens' bare feet like a second skin as she walked the scorching street of Valentine, Nebraska, her toes cracking and bleeding from another day of surviving in a town that had forgotten what mercy looked like. It was July of 1882, and the small frontier settlement buzzed with the usual afternoon activity. Cowboys rode through on their way to the cattle ranches that dotted the landscape. Merchants hawked their wares, and respectable women in their fine dresses crossed the street to avoid Clara as though poverty might be contagious. She had grown used to the looks, the whispers, the way mothers pulled their children closer when she passed. What she had not grown used to was the pain that shot through her feet with every step, the humiliation of being the only person in town who could not afford something as basic as shoes. Clara had been orphaned 3 years ago when cholera swept through their small homestead 20 miles outside of town. Her father had been a dreamer, always talking about the fortune they would make, the land they would claim, the future that stretched before them like the endless prairie. But dreams did not pay bills, and when sickness came, it took both her parents within a week of each other. At 15, Clara had buried them both in shallow graves she dug herself, marked with crude wooden crosses that the wind probably knocked over long ago. She had made her way to Valentine with nothing but the dress on her back, hoping to find work, hoping for kindness. What she found instead was a harsh lesson about how the world treated young women with no family, no money, and no prospects. For 3 years, she had scraped by doing whatever work people would give her, which was not much. She washed clothes in the creek for a few pennies, swept the floors of the general store before dawn, and helped the doctor's wife with her garden in exchange for vegetable scraps. But it was never enough. The boarding house where she rented a tiny corner of an attic room took most of what she earned, leaving her with barely enough to eat, let alone clothe herself properly. Her dress had been mended so many times it was more patches than original fabric. And shoes, real shoes, were a luxury so far beyond her reach they might as well have been made of gold. The general store loomed ahead, and Clara steeled herself for another humiliating exchange. She had promised Mrs. Henderson she would sweep today, and she desperately needed the nickel the woman would pay her. Her stomach had been empty since yesterday morning. As she approached the wooden steps leading up to the store's entrance, she tried to walk normally, tried not to limp or show the pain. But a sharp stone caught the tender flesh of her heel, and she stumbled, catching herself on the railing with a gasp. "Watch where you are going," a woman said sharply, gathering her skirts away from Clara as though she were something dirty. Clara did not respond. She had learned that silence was often the safest choice. She pulled herself up the steps and pushed through the door, the bell above jingling to announce her arrival. Mr. Patterson, the store owner, looked up from his ledger and frowned. "Door around back for your kind, girl. Mrs. Henderson asked me to sweep," Clara said quietly, keeping her eyes down. "Well, be quick about it. You are bad for business standing there looking like something the cat dragged in." Clara nodded and moved to fetch the broom from the storage room. She had heard worse, much worse. As she began sweeping the already relatively clean floor, she tried to make herself invisible, a skill she had perfected over the years. The door opened again, and this time the bell's cheerful jingle heralded the arrival of someone who made Mr. Patterson's demeanor change entirely. "Mr. Barrett, what a pleasure. Come in, come in. What can I do for you today?" Clara kept her head down and continued sweeping, but she could not help stealing a glance at the newcomer. Dalton Barrett was not a man easily ignored. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders that came from years of hard ranch work. His hat was pushed back, revealing dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. He was dressed like most cowboys, in worn denim and a work shirt, but there was something about the way he carried himself that set him apart. Confidence, maybe, or just the self-assurance that came from being good at what you did. Clara knew who he was, of course. Everyone in Valentine knew Dalton Barrett. He worked at the Double B Ranch, the largest cattle operation in the county, and had a reputation as the best wrangler in 3 states. People said he could gentle the wildest horse, that he could read cattle like other men read books, that he was honest and fair and commanded respect without demanding it. He was also, Clara could not help but notice, handsome in the way that made her stomach flutter despite herself. Not that it mattered. Men like Dalton Barrett did not notice women like Clara Owens. She was beneath his world, invisible except when she was in the way. "Just need some supplies, Patterson," Dalton said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to fill the store. "Got a list here." As Mr. Patterson fussed over Dalton's order, Clara continued her work, sweeping carefully around the displays of goods she could never afford. Bolts of fabric, canned foods, tools, and there in the corner, a small display of shoes and boots. She let her eyes linger on them for just a moment, imagining what it would feel like to have her feet protected, to walk without pain. "Girl, you missed a spot," Mr. Patterson snapped, pointing to an area Clara had already swept twice. She murmured an apology and went over it again, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. She could feel Dalton's eyes on her now, and that somehow made everything worse. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the floorboards. "How much do I owe you?" Dalton asked after his supplies were tallied. As Mr. Patterson calculated the total, Clara finished her sweeping and returned the broom to its place. She approached the counter hesitantly, waiting for Mrs. Henderson to appear with her payment. "Mrs. Henderson is not here," Mr. Patterson said dismissively. "She went home with a headache." "You will have to come back tomorrow." Clara's heart sank. "But she said today, she promised." "Well, she is not here, is she? Now get along, I have a paying customer to attend to." Desperation made Clara brave. "Could you pay me, please, sir?" "She said she would pay me today, and I have not eaten since yesterday." Mr. Patterson's face reddened. "I am not in the habit of paying for work I did not commission, and I will not be manipulated by sob stories from beggars. Out with you now, before I call the sheriff." Clara felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. She would not cry, not here, not in front of these men. She turned to leave, her empty stomach cramping with hunger and disappointment. "Hold on," Dalton's voice stopped her at the door. "Patterson, give the girl her nickel." "I will cover it. Mr. Barrett, you do not need to concern yourself with this. She is just trying to take advantage." "Did she do the work?" Dalton asked, his tone still mild but with an edge to it now. "Well, yes, but that is beside the point." "Then give her the nickel. Add it to my bill." Mr. Patterson's mouth pressed into a thin line, but he did not argue further. He pulled a nickel from the cash box and held it out, though Clara had to approach the counter again to take it. She reached for the coin, and as her hand extended, she saw Dalton's eyes drop to her feet. His expression changed, hardening into something she could not quite read. Anger, maybe, or shock. She grabbed the nickel and retreated quickly, mumbling her thanks to Dalton before fleeing the store. Outside, the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly. Clara's head swam with hunger and exhaustion, but the nickel clutched in her hand represented hope. She could buy a small loaf of bread, maybe some cheese if the store on the other end of town had any that was starting to turn. It would be enough to get her through another day or two. She was halfway down the steps when she heard the store door open behind her. "Wait," Dalton called out. Clara turned, confused and wary. Men who called after her usually wanted something she was not willing to give, but Dalton was not looking at her the way those men did. His eyes were on her feet again, and his jaw was set in a way that spoke of decision made. "Come with me," he said, descending the steps. "I do not understand," Clara said, taking a step back. "To the bootmaker. You need shoes." Clara stared at him, certain she had misheard. "I cannot afford shoes, I know. That is why I am buying them for you." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Clara grabbed the railing to steady herself. "Why would you do that? You do not even know me." Dalton's expression softened slightly. "I do not need to know you to see that you need help. And I have seen you around town, working harder than most men I know for scraps that would not feed a bird. If I can help, I am going to help. Now come on before I change my mind about how much I am willing to argue about it." Something in his tone, gruff but kind, made Clara believe he was serious. And the truth was, she was too tired and too desperate to refuse. If this stranger wanted to buy her shoes, she would let him. Pride was a luxury she could not afford. "All right," she whispered. Dalton nodded and started walking. Clara followed, acutely aware of every person who turned to stare at the odd pair they made. Dalton Barrett, respected cowboy and ranch hand, walking down Main Street with the poorest girl in Valentine. The bootmaker's shop was a small establishment squeezed between the saloon and the barber. Clara had never been inside, had only pressed her nose against the window once or twice to admire the craftsmanship on display. A bell chimed as they entered, and a portly man with spectacles looked up from his workbench. "Dalton, good to see you. What brings you by?" "Those boots I made you last year holding up. Best I have ever owned, Henry. But I am not here for me today. The lady needs boots. Something sturdy, good quality." Henry turned his attention to Clara, and she braced herself for the look of disdain she usually received. But Henry just smiled kindly. "Well, let us see what we can do. Young lady, if you would sit here." Clara perched on the edge of the chair he indicated, feeling completely out of her element. Henry knelt down and examined her feet, clucking his tongue at the damage he saw. "These feet have been through a lot," he said gently. "We will fix you up, though. I have just the thing." As Henry measured and assessed, Dalton stood near the window, his back to them as he looked out at the street. Clara studied him when she thought he was not paying attention. Why was he doing this? What did he want in return? In her experience, no one gave something for nothing. "I have a pair that will work," Henry announced, disappearing into the back room. He returned with a pair of brown leather boots, simple but well made. These were custom ordered but never picked up. They should fit with maybe a little room to grow, which is good. You want boots that will last. He helped Clara slip them on, and the sensation was so foreign she almost cried. The leather was soft against her damaged skin, the soles thick and protective. When she stood, her feet did not hurt. For the first time in 3 years, she took a step without pain. "They fit?" Henry asked. Clara could only nod, too overwhelmed to speak. "Excellent." "That will be $2.50, Dalton." Clara's eyes widened. $2.50 was more money than she could earn in months. It was in fortune, an impossible sum. But Dalton just pulled out his billfold and counted out the money without hesitation. "Thank you, Henry. Appreciate you taking care of us. Anytime, my friend. Young lady, you take care of those boots. Treat them well and they will last you years." "I will," Clara managed to say. Thank you so much." Outside, the sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange. Clara stood on the wooden sidewalk in her new boots, still not quite believing this was real. "I do not know how to thank you," she said, turning to Dalton. "This is the kindest thing anyone has done for me in longer than I can remember." Dalton shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable with her gratitude. "It was just a pair of boots. You needed them." "It is more than boots to me. It is everything." Clara paused, then forced herself to ask the question that had been nagging at her. Why did you do it? Really? What do you want from me? Dalton met her eyes, and she saw something in them that made her breath catch. Not lust or calculation, but something else. Something that looked almost like pain. I do not want anything from you, he said quietly. I had a sister once. She was about your age when she died. She was sick, and we could not afford the medicine that might have saved her. I have thought a lot about that over the years, about how something as simple as having enough might have changed everything. When I saw your feet today, bleeding and torn up, and you just trying to survive, asking for the nickel you earned, I thought about Sarah. I thought about how I would have wanted someone to help her if I could not, so I am helping you. That is all there is to it. Clara felt tears spill over despite her best efforts to contain them. I am so sorry about your sister. It was a long time ago, 5 years now. But you do not forget that kind of thing. Dalton cleared his throat, clearly ready to change the subject. Do you have somewhere to go, somewhere safe? I rent a space at the boarding house. Mrs. Murphy's place. Dalton frowned. I know that house, it is not a good place. It is what I can afford. Have you eaten today? The question reminded Clara of the gnawing emptiness in her stomach. Not yet, but I have my nickel. I was going to buy some bread. A nickel is not going to get you much. Come on, the restaurant will still be serving supper. I cannot let you buy me supper too, Clara protested. You have already done too much. You can, and I am going to. Dalton's tone left no room for argument. Besides, I have not eaten either, and I do not like eating alone. You would be doing me a favor. Clara strongly suspected this was not true, but she was too hungry and too grateful to argue further. She followed him to the small restaurant that served the best food in Valentine, according to town gossip Clara had overheard. The woman who ran the establishment, a formidable lady named Mrs. Chen, who had come west with her husband to work on the railroad, raised her eyebrows when they entered together. Mr. Barrett, your usual table. Yes, madam. For 2 tonight. If Mrs. Chen had opinions about Dalton dining with the poorest girl in town, she kept them to herself. She led them to a table by the window and brought water in actual glasses, not tin cups. The special tonight is beef stew with fresh bread and butter. Apple pie for dessert if you have room. That sounds perfect, Dalton said. 2 of the special, please. When Mrs. Chen left, Clara leaned forward. I have never eaten in a restaurant before, she admitted. Well, you are in for a treat. Mrs. Chen makes the best stew in Nebraska. They sat in silence for a moment, and Clara realized she did not know how to do this. How did people make conversation over a meal? What did they talk about? How long have you been in Valentine? Dalton asked, saving her from her uncertainty. 3 years, give or take, since my parents died. No other family, none that would claim me. My father's brother lives in Kansas, but when I wrote to him after the funeral, he never replied. I think he made his position clear enough. That is rough. I am sorry. Clara shrugged, trying to appear indifferent even though the rejection had cut deep. What about you? Have you always been in Valentine? No, I came here about 4 years ago. I am from Kansas originally, but after Sarah died and then my mother a year later, my father took to drinking. When he drank, he got mean. So I left, worked my way west doing ranch work wherever I could find it. Ended up at the Double B, and the owner, Mr. Bernard, he gave me a real chance. Taught me more about cattle and horses than I ever thought there was to know. Been there ever since. Mrs. Chen arrived with their meals, and the smell alone nearly made Clara faint. The stew was thick with chunks of beef and vegetables. The bread was warm and soft, and there was real butter, not the lard substitute she occasionally managed to acquire. Eat, Dalton encouraged, digging into his own bowl. Clara did not need to be told twice. She tried to eat slowly, to have manners, but she was so hungry that she could barely restrain herself. The food was the most delicious thing she had ever tasted, and she had to fight back tears at the simple kindness of a warm meal. Dalton ate at a more measured pace, and she noticed he kept his attention on his own food, giving her privacy in her desperate hunger. It was a small thing, but it was thoughtful, and it made her like him even more. "So what kind of work do you do?" Dalton asked between bites. "Besides sweeping for people who do not want to pay you, whatever I can find. Washing, mending, gardening, cleaning. Some days I help unload wagons when they come through. It is not steady and it does not pay much, but it is enough to keep a roof over my head most months." "That is a hard way to live." "It is the only way I know." Dalton was quiet for a moment, then said, "Can you cook?" "Yes, my mother taught me." "Why?" "The Double B has been looking for someone to help in the kitchen. Old Pete, who does the cooking for the ranch hands, is getting up in years and he could use the help. It would be steady work, 3 meals a day for about 20 men. Room and board included, plus wages." Clara's heart started to race. "Are you serious?" "I would not joke about something like that." "I could put in a word with Mr. Bernard. Cannot promise anything, but he trusts my judgment. If I vouch for you, he will at least give you a chance." "Why would you do that? You do not know if I am any good at cooking." "Are you any good at cooking?" Clara thought about the years she had spent helping her mother prepare meals, the way she had learned to make something out of nothing, to stretch ingredients and create flavor even when resources were scarce. "Yes," she said with more confidence than she usually allowed herself. "Yes, I am good at cooking." "Then there is your answer. Everyone deserves a chance to prove what they can do. I am just offering you that chance." The rest of the meal passed in a blur. They talked about small things, safe things. Dalton told her about the ranch, about the wide open spaces and the cattle drives and the horses he trained. Clara found herself relaxing, actually enjoying the conversation. Dalton was easy to talk to, not demanding or condescending. He listened when she spoke, asked questions like her answers actually mattered. When the apple pie arrived, Clara thought she might actually be too full to eat it. But the first bite changed her mind immediately. It was sweet and tart and perfect, and she savored every morsel. "Thank you," she said when they were finished, "for everything. The boots, the meal, the possible job. I do not understand why you are being so kind to me, but I am grateful, more grateful than I can say." "You do not have to keep thanking me," Dalton said, but his tone was gentle. "Just promise me you will take care of yourself, and come by the ranch tomorrow morning. I will talk to Mr. Bernard tonight, I promise, and I will be there." They left the restaurant together, stepping out into the cool evening air. The sun had set, and stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Dalton walked Clara to the boarding house, a ramshackle building at the edge of town that looked like it might blow over in a strong wind. "This is it," Clara said, feeling embarrassed by the state of the place. "All right. You take care tonight, and Clara?" "Yes. I am glad I went into Patterson's store today." Clara smiled, a real genuine smile that felt strange on her face. "So am I." She watched him walk away, his tall figure disappearing into the shadows. Then she looked down at her boots, solid and real on her feet, and felt something she had not felt in 3 years. Hope. Inside the boarding house, Mrs. Murphy intercepted her at the stairs. "Rent is due tomorrow. You have it." Clara thought about the nickel in her pocket. It was all she had, and it was not nearly enough. "I might have a job starting tomorrow. I can pay you by the end of the week." Mrs. Murphy's eyes narrowed. "I have heard that before. If you do not have the money by Friday, you are out. Understand?" "Yes, madam." Clara climbed the narrow stairs to the attic, her new boots making solid sounds on the old wood. In her tiny corner, barely big enough for the thin mattress and the crate that held her few possessions. She removed her boots carefully and set them where she could see them. Tomorrow could change everything. Tomorrow she might have steady work, might be able to build a real life instead of just surviving day to day. And it was all because of Dalton Barrett, a man who had shown her kindness for no reason except that it was the right thing to do. As she lay down on her mattress, her stomach full for the first time in recent memory, Clara let herself imagine a future that included more than just pain and poverty. She let herself imagine working at the ranch, earning honest wages, maybe even saving enough to have a real home someday. And if she also imagined seeing Dalton every day, learning more about the man behind the kind eyes and gentle smile, well, that was a dream she would keep to herself. The next morning, Clara woke before dawn, too excited and nervous to sleep. She put on her boots, marveling again at how they transformed something as simple as walking. She washed her face with water from the basin, did her best to tame her long brown hair, and brushed off her dress until it looked as presentable as the worn fabric would allow. The walk to the Double B Ranch took nearly an hour, but Clara did not mind. The morning was cool and clear, and her new boots made the journey almost pleasant. As the sun rose, painting the prairie in shades of gold and amber, she felt something like joy bubbling up inside her. The ranch spread out across the landscape like a small town. There was a large main house, several barns, corrals filled with horses, and a long building that had to be the bunkhouse where the ranch hands stayed. Cattle dotted the distant fields, their lowing carrying on the morning breeze. Clara approached hesitantly, not sure where she was supposed to go. A man emerged from one of the barns, leading a beautiful chestnut horse. "Can I help you?" he asked, not unkindly. "I am looking for Mr. Bernard. Dalton Barrett said I should come by about a job in the kitchen." The man's eyebrows rose. "You are the girl Dalton told us about. Come on, I will take you to the boss." He led her to the main house and knocked on the door. A moment later, it opened to reveal a man in his 50s with gray hair and sharp blue eyes that assessed Clara in a single glance. "Mr. Bernard, this is the girl Dalton mentioned," the ranch hand said. "Thank you, Tom, that will be all." Mr. Bernard turned his attention to Clara. "You are Clara Owens." "Yes, sir." "Dalton spoke highly of you, says you are a hard worker and a good cook. Is that true?" "I work as hard as anyone, sir, and I can cook. My mother taught me well." "Experience feeding 20 hungry men?" "No, sir, but I am a fast learner and I am not afraid of hard work." Mr. Bernard studied her for a long moment. "Dalton is the best judge of character I have ever known. If he says you deserve a chance, that is good enough for me. The job is yours on a trial basis. 2 weeks. If Pete says you are pulling your weight, you can stay. Wages are $15 a month plus room and board. You will bunk in the small cabin behind the kitchen. Meals are at 6 in the morning, noon, and 6 in the evening. We expect food that is hot, plentiful, and edible. Think you can handle that? $15 a month. It was more money than Clara had ever dreamed of earning. "Yes, sir, I can handle it." "Good." "Pete is in the kitchen now starting breakfast. Go introduce yourself and get to work." Clara found the kitchen in a building separate from the main house. The smell of coffee and bacon greeted her as she pushed open the door. Inside, an elderly man with a wild white beard and kind eyes stood at a massive stove. "You must be Clara," he said, his voice raspy but warm. "Dalton said you would be coming. I am Pete. Welcome to the organized chaos that is feeding this lot. Thank you. What can I do to help?" Pete gestured to a pile of potatoes. "Start peeling. We will need about 50 for breakfast hash." Clara set to work immediately, her hands quick and efficient. As she peeled, Pete kept up a running commentary about the ranch, the men, and what to expect. Most of them are good fellows. Work hard, do not complain too much, but they eat like starved wolves, so you have got to cook enough to satisfy that. Dalton, he usually sits at the far end of the table. Quiet type, but the men respect him. He's got a way with the animals that is almost magical. As if summoned by the mention of his name, the kitchen door opened and Dalton stepped in. His eyes found Clara immediately and his face broke into a smile. "You made it." "I did. Thank you for this. Mr. Bernard said you put in a good word." "Just told him the truth. How is Pete treating you?" "Like I have been here for years," Clara said, smiling at the old cook. "Well, I will let you get to work. Just wanted to check in." Dalton hesitated, then added, "It is good to see you here." After he left, Pete chuckled. "That boy has never checked in on a new hire before." "I think he has taken a shine to you." Clara felt her cheeks heat. "He is just being kind." "Maybe, or maybe it is more than that. Either way, you have got a friend here, and that is never a bad thing." The morning flew by in a flurry of activity. Clara helped Pete prepare eggs, bacon, hash, biscuits, and gravy for the ranch hands. When the men filed in for breakfast, she felt nervous, but they seemed more interested in food than in scrutinizing the new kitchen help. Dalton sat where Pete had said he would, at the far end of the long table. He caught Clara's eye once and gave her a small nod of encouragement. It was a tiny thing, but it steadied her nerves. After breakfast, there was cleanup, then preparation for the noon meal. Pete showed her the pantry, the smokehouse, the root cellar. He taught her his systems, his preferences, his tricks for making food stretch and taste good. "You are a natural," he said as they worked together to prepare a stew for dinner. "Got good instincts. I can see why Dalton vouched for you." "He barely knows me," Clara said. "Sometimes you do not need to know someone long to see their character. Dalton, he has got a sense about people. If he says you are good people, you are good people." The 2 weeks of Clara's trial period passed in a blur of hard work and small victories. She learned the rhythms of the ranch, the preferences of the men, the best ways to manage the massive amounts of food required to keep everyone fed. Pete was a patient teacher, and Clara absorbed everything he shared. But the best part of each day was seeing Dalton. He made a point of stopping by the kitchen each morning, ostensibly to refill his coffee, but Clara suspected it was more than that. They would talk for a few minutes about nothing important, but those conversations became the highlight of her day. She learned that he loved the early morning hours when the world was quiet, that his favorite horse was a temperamental mare named Sadie, that he could play the harmonica but was too shy to do so in front of people. He learned that she had always wanted to learn to read better, that she missed her mother's singing, that she had a fear of thunderstorms that came from being alone during a tornado when she was 12. On the final day of her trial period, Mr. Bernard came to the kitchen just as breakfast was wrapping up. "Pete, how is our new hire working out?" Pete did not hesitate. "Best help I have had in 20 years. She works harder than men twice her size, never complains, and has a real talent for cooking. You would be a fool to let her go, boss." Mr. Bernard turned to Clara. "Sounds like you have made quite an impression. The job is yours permanently if you want it." "I want it," Clara said immediately. "Thank you, sir. You will not regret this. See that I do not. Pete, she is all yours." That evening, after dinner was served and cleaned up, Clara stepped outside for some fresh air. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of pink and orange. She was exhausted but happy, more content than she had been in years. "Congratulations," a familiar voice said. She turned to find Dalton leaning against the fence, his hat tilted back. "You heard," Pete told everyone at dinner. "He is proud of you, you know. Says you are the best thing to happen to this kitchen in decades. I am just doing my job. You are doing more than that. You are making this place better." Dalton paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. Clara, I want to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. All right. Are you happy here? Really happy? Not just grateful for the job, but actually content? Clara considered the question seriously. Yes, she said finally. For the first time since my parents died, I feel like I have a place, like I belong somewhere, so yes, I am happy. Dalton smiled, and the warmth in his expression made her heart skip. Good, that is good. You deserve to be happy. What about you? Clara asked. Are you happy? I am getting there, Dalton said, his eyes meeting hers. Especially lately. There was something in the way he said it, in the way he looked at her, that made Clara's breath catch. But before she could respond, another ranch hand called for Dalton, needing his help with a difficult horse. I should go, Dalton said reluctantly. But Clara, I was wondering if maybe on Sunday, when we both have some time off, you might want to go for a ride with me. I could show you some of the ranch, the parts you have not seen yet. I would like that, Clara said, trying to keep her voice steady even as her heart raced. I would like that very much. Sunday came with perfect weather, sunny and warm with a gentle breeze. Clara wore her best dress, which still was not much, but she had washed and mended it carefully. She braided her hair and pinched her cheeks for color, feeling foolish and excited in equal measure. Dalton met her at the barn with 2 horses already saddled. One was his usual mount, a steady gelding named Duke. The other was a gentle mare with a sweet disposition. This is Clover, Dalton said, patting the mare's neck. She is perfect for beginners. Have you ridden much? Not since I was a child. My father had a horse, but we had to sell it when times got hard. You will be fine. I will be right beside you. Dalton helped Clara mount, his hands gentle as he guided her foot into the stirrup. Once she was settled, he swung onto Duke with easy grace, and they set out across the prairie. The ranch land stretched for miles, rolling grasslands dotted with cattle and the occasional stand of cottonwood trees. Dalton led them at an easy pace, pointing out landmarks and sharing stories about the ranch. That is where we had the big roundup last spring. Tom got thrown from his horse and landed in the creek. He was madder than a wet hen, but we all got a good laugh out of it. Over there, see those rocks? That is where I like to come when I need to think. You can see for miles from up there. They rode for over an hour until they reached a spot where a small creek bubbled over smooth stones. Cottonwood trees provided shade, and the grass was thick and green. This is my favorite place on the whole ranch, Dalton said, dismounting. He helped Clara down, his hands lingering at her waist for just a moment longer than necessary. They sat by the creek, listening to the water and the birds. Clara felt a peace she had not known existed, a contentment that went bone deep. Thank you for bringing me here, she said. Thank you for coming. Dalton picked up a smooth stone and turned it over in his hands. Clara, I need to tell you something. The serious tone made her nervous. What is it? When I first saw you in Patterson's store, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. A pull, I guess you would call it. Like I was supposed to help you, supposed to know you. At first, I thought it was just about my sister, about wanting to help someone the way I could not help her. But the more time I spend with you, the more I talk to you and get to know you, I realize it is more than that. Clara's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. More than that how? Dalton set down the stone and turned to face her fully. I care about you, Clara, not just as someone who needed help, but as a woman I admire and respect and want to know better. I think about you all the time. When something good happens, you are the first person I want to tell. When something is hard, you are who I want to talk to about it. I know we have not known each other long, but I cannot ignore what I feel. Clara could hardly breathe. Dalton, I feel the same way. You have shown me kindness when I had forgotten what that looked like. You have given me hope and a future, and made me believe I could be more than just someone barely surviving. How could I not care about you?" Dalton reached out and took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. The simple touch sent warmth through her entire body. "I do not have much to offer you," he said. "I am just a ranch hand, and I probably always will be, but I work hard and I am honest, and I would do everything in my power to make you happy. If you would let me court you properly, I would be honored." "Yes," Clara said, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Yes, Dalton, I would like that very much." He smiled, that beautiful warm smile that transformed his whole face, and gently wiped away her tears with his thumb. "No more crying unless it is from happiness." "These are happy tears," Clara assured him. They sat by the creek for hours, talking about everything and nothing. Dalton told her about his dreams of maybe owning his own ranch someday, of raising horses and cattle, of building something lasting. Clara shared her hope of having a real home, a family, a place where she truly belonged. As the sun began to set, they rode back to the ranch slowly, neither wanting the day to end. At the barn, Dalton helped Clara dismount, and this time when his hand settled at her waist, he did not let go immediately. "Can I see you again tomorrow? After dinner, maybe we could take a walk. I would love that." Over the following months, Clara and Dalton's courtship deepened. They stole moments together whenever they could, early morning conversations in the kitchen, evening walks under the stars, Sunday rides to their special place by the creek. The other ranch hands noticed and teased Dalton good-naturedly, but he took it all with a smile. Clara bloomed under the attention and affection. The hollow look in her cheeks filled out as she ate regular meals. Her skin cleared, her eyes brightened, and she carried herself with a confidence she had never possessed before. She was not just surviving anymore, she was living. Pete became something of a father figure to her, teaching her not just about cooking but about life. "That boy loves you," he told her one evening as they prepared dinner. "I have known Dalton for 4 years, and I have never seen him like this. You are good for each other." "I love him too," Clara admitted. "So much it scares me sometimes. Love is supposed to be a little scary, means it is real." As autumn painted the prairie in shades of gold and red, Dalton asked Clara to take another Sunday ride with him. They went to their spot by the creek, now surrounded by fall colors. "I have been thinking," Dalton said as they sat on their usual rock, "about the future, about what I want my life to look like." "What do you want?" Clara asked. "I want a ranch of my own someday. Nothing as big as the Double B, but enough to make a good living. I want to raise horses, maybe some cattle. I want a home that is filled with laughter and love." He paused, then took her hand. "And I want you beside me for all of it." Clara's breath caught. "Dalton." He slid off the rock and onto one knee, pulling a small box from his pocket. "Clara Owens, I know we have not known each other long, just a handful of months, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. You are the strongest, kindest, most remarkable woman I have ever known. You have survived things that would have broken most people, and you have done it with grace and dignity. I love you more than I thought possible to love anyone. Will you marry me?" He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small but beautiful diamond. It was not ornate or expensive, but to Clara it was the most precious thing in the world. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Dalton, yes, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. Then he stood and pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was something precious and fragile and infinitely valuable. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this," he murmured against her hair. "I could never regret choosing you." They were married 6 weeks later in a small ceremony at the church in Valentine. Pete stood up with Dalton, and Mrs. Chen, who had become a friend to Clara, stood with her. Mr. Bernard attended, as did many of the ranch hands, even Mrs. Murphy from the boarding house came, looking almost tearful as she watched Clara marry the man who had first bought her boots and now was giving her his name. Clara wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Chen had helped her make. Dalton wore his best suit, his dark hair slicked back, his eyes never leaving his bride. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Dalton kissed Clara with a tenderness that made her forget anyone else existed. They were just two people who had found each other against all odds, who had chosen love over loneliness. The ranch hands had organized a small celebration in the bunkhouse after the ceremony. There was music and dancing, food and laughter. Clara danced with Dalton until her feet hurt, which made her think of those bloody, bare feet from months ago and how far she had come. "What are you thinking?" Dalton asked as they swayed to a slow song. "About the day you bought me boots, how that one act of kindness changed everything." "You changed everything," Dalton corrected. "You made me want to be better, to build something meaningful. You gave me a reason to dream again. We can dream together now." "Yes, we can." Mr. Bernard had given them a week off for their honeymoon, and Dalton used it to take Clara to see the land he had been secretly saving to buy. It was 100 acres about 10 miles from the Double B, with a creek running through it and good grazing land. "I have been putting away money for 3 years," Dalton explained as they stood looking over the property. "I have almost enough for the down payment. In another year, maybe 2, we could actually buy it. Build a house right there on that rise, barns over there, corrals for the horses." Clara could see it all in her mind's eye, the future they would build together. "It is perfect. You think so, I know so." They returned to the ranch and settled into married life. Mr. Bernard had given them the small cabin that Clara had been using, but Dalton added on to it, building a proper bedroom and a sitting area. It was not much, but it was theirs, and Clara made it into a home with curtains she sewed and furniture Dalton built. Life fell into a comfortable rhythm. Clara continued to work in the kitchen with Pete, and Dalton worked with the cattle and horses. At night, they would sit together on the porch of their cabin, talking about their day and making plans for the future. A year after their wedding, Dalton came home with news that made Clara scream with joy. "I did it. I bought the land. It is ours, Clara. We have our ranch." They named it the Double C Ranch for Clara and the creek that ran through the property. Dalton continued working at the Double B while building their new home in his spare time. Many of the ranch hands helped, and soon a small but sturdy house rose on the hill overlooking the creek. It took 2 years of hard work and careful planning, but finally, the Double C was ready. Clara and Dalton moved into their home with little more than what they could carry, but it felt like a palace. "I cannot believe this is ours," Clara said, standing in the main room with its stone fireplace and wide windows. "We built this together," Dalton said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Everything we have, we earned." Clara had never forgotten what it felt like to have nothing, to be so poor she could not afford shoes. That memory kept her humble and grateful, even as their ranch began to prosper. Dalton had a gift for raising horses, and word spread quickly about the quality of animals from the Double C. They started small, but within 3 years they had a thriving business. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Clara had news of her own. "I am pregnant," she told Dalton over dinner. The fork fell from his hand. "Are you certain?" The doctor confirmed it yesterday. "We are going to have a baby, Dalton." He was around the table in an instant, pulling her into his arms. "A baby. We are going to have a baby, Clara. I am going to be a father. And I am going to be a mother." "Are you happy?" Happy does not begin to cover it. "I am terrified and thrilled and so in love with you, I cannot see straight." Their son was born on a cold February morning in 1888. They named him Samuel, after Dalton's father, who had died the previous year, having made peace with his son before the end. Samuel had his mother's brown eyes and his father's dark hair, and from the moment he entered the world, he had both his parents wrapped around his tiny fingers. Clara proved to be a natural mother, patient and loving but firm when needed. Dalton was equally devoted, often found rocking Samuel to sleep or carrying him around the ranch in a sling Clara had made. 2 years later, their daughter was born. They named her Sarah, after the sister Dalton had lost. She had blonde hair like Dalton's mother and a smile that could light up a room. As the children grew, so did the ranch. They hired hands to help with the work, and Dalton's reputation as a horse trainer brought buyers from as far away as Kansas City and Denver. Clara managed the business side of things, her sharp mind for numbers proving invaluable. But no matter how successful they became, Clara and Dalton never forgot where they had started. Every year on the anniversary of the day, Dalton bought Clara her first pair of boots. They would donate money to help those in need in Valentine. They paid for shoes for children who could not afford them, gave food to families struggling to make ends meet, and always treated everyone with the dignity and respect Clara had so often been denied. Pete had come to live with them after he grew too old to work at the Double B, and he spent his final years teaching Samuel and Sarah how to cook, telling them stories about how their parents met, making sure they understood the value of kindness. "Your papa," he told them one evening, "he saw your mama when everyone else looked past her. He saw her worth when she had been made to feel worthless. That is the kind of people you come from, people who see the good in others and have the courage to act on it." Pete passed away peacefully in his sleep when Samuel was 10 and Sarah was 8. They buried him on the ranch, under a cottonwood tree with a marker that read, "Friend, Teacher, Family." The years passed, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children. Samuel grew into a young man much like his father, quiet and thoughtful with a gift for understanding animals. Sarah was spirited and clever, with her mother's determination and her father's kind heart. When Samuel turned 18, he told his parents he wanted to start a horse breeding program, focusing on temperament and endurance. Dalton gave him a portion of the ranch to manage, and within 3 years, Samuel's program was bringing in as much money as the main operation. Sarah surprised everyone by announcing she wanted to be a teacher. She studied at a school in Omaha and returned to Valentine to open a small schoolhouse that served the children of local ranchers and townsfolk alike. As Dalton and Clara watched their children build lives of meaning and purpose, they often reflected on how far they had come. "You remember that day in Patterson's store?" Clara asked one evening as they sat on the porch of their home, watching the sun set over their land. "Every detail," Dalton replied. "I remember thinking I had never seen anyone work so hard for so little. I remember your feet, bleeding and bare. I remember being angry that the world could be so cruel to someone who was just trying to survive. If you had not bought me those boots, where would I be now? You would have survived," Dalton said with certainty. "You are the strongest person I know. You would have found a way, maybe. But I would not have found you. I would not have this life, these children, this happiness." "You gave me everything, Dalton." "We gave each other everything," he corrected, taking her hand. "You think I was not struggling before I met you? I was going through the motions, working hard but not really living. You made me want more, want better, want to build something that mattered." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, comfortable in the silence that came from decades of knowing each other. The boots Dalton had bought her all those years ago sat in a special box in their bedroom, carefully preserved. Beside them was the wedding ring he had given her, which she still wore every day, though they could now afford much finer things. Those items represented more than just objects. They were symbols of the moment everything changed. The instant kindness and courage intersected to create something beautiful. In the summer of 1910, when Clara and Dalton had been married for 27 years, the whole family gathered at the Double C for a celebration. Samuel had married a woman named Emma, and they had 3 children. Sarah had married a teacher from Omaha, and they had 2 children of their own. The house was full of laughter and noise, grandchildren running through the halls. The adults gathered around the large dining table Clara and Dalton had built together. "I want to make a toast," Samuel said, standing with his glass raised. "To my parents who built all of this from nothing. Who showed us what real love looks like, what hard work and dedication can accomplish. Everything we are, everything we have starts with the 2 of you." "Hear, hear," Sarah added, "and to the Boots." Everyone laughed at that. The story of the Boots had become family legend, told and retold until everyone knew it by heart. "The Boots," Dalton agreed, raising his glass. "And to the woman who wore them. The woman who took a simple act of kindness and turned it into a lifetime of love." "To the man who saw me when I was invisible," Clara added, her eyes shining with tears. "Who gave me not just boots but a future, not just a ring but a family, not just his name but his heart." They drank together, 3 generations bound by love and respect, and the understanding that family was not just about blood, but about choosing each other every single day. That night, after the grandchildren were asleep and the house had quieted, Clara and Dalton took their customary walk to the creek. The path was well worn now, traveled countless times over the decades. "You think we did it right?" Clara asked. "Raising the children, building the ranch, all of it. I think we did our best," Dalton replied. "And I think our best was pretty damn good. Look at them, Clara. Samuel and Sarah, they are good people, kind people. They work hard and love deeply and treat others with respect. What more could we ask for? Nothing. You are right. We did good. We did." They stood by the creek, the same spot where Dalton had proposed so many years ago. The water still bubbled over the same smooth stones. The cottonwood trees were taller now, their branches creating a canopy overhead. "I would do it all again," Clara said suddenly. "Every hardship, every struggle, every moment of pain and poverty. I would do it all again if it meant ending up here with you." Dalton pulled her close, his arms still strong despite his 60 years. "I would too. Though I wish you had not had to suffer so much before we found each other. The suffering made me appreciate this even more, made me never take a single day for granted." They walked back to the house hand in hand, their steps slower than they used to be, but no less steady. Inside, their home was filled with the people they loved most, the legacy they had built together. Clara thought about the girl she had been, barefoot and desperate, begging for the nickel she had earned. That girl could never have imagined this life. Could never have dreamed that a simple pair of boots would lead to everything she had ever wanted, and so much more. But Dalton had seen potential where others saw poverty. He had seen worth where others saw worthlessness. He had given her boots to protect her feet and a ring to claim her heart, and in return, she had given him a love that would last beyond lifetimes. Years continued to pass with the steady rhythm of ranch life. Dalton and Clara grew older, their hair turning silver, their steps becoming slower. But their love never diminished. If anything, it deepened, becoming richer and more profound with each passing year. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the family threw a grand celebration. People came from all over Nebraska to honor the couple who had built not just a successful ranch, but a legacy of kindness and integrity. The same church where they had married hosted the anniversary celebration. The building had been expanded over the years, but the original structure remained, including the altar where they had exchanged their vows. 50 years, the preacher said in his speech. 50 years of marriage is a remarkable achievement. But what makes Dalton and Clara's union even more special is not just its longevity, but the quality of love they have shown each other and everyone around them. They have made this community better by their presence, their generosity, and their example. Clara wore a new dress for the occasion, emerald green to match her eyes, which still sparkled despite her age. Dalton wore a suit that Samuel had purchased for him, and he stood tall and proud beside his wife. When it was their turn to speak, Dalton helped Clara to her feet and they stood together at the front of the church. "I am not much for speeches," Dalton began, "but I want to say thank you. Thank you to all of you for being part of our lives, our journey, and most of all, thank you to Clara. You took a chance on a cowboy who had nothing to offer but his heart and his hands. You made me better than I ever thought I could be. You gave me a reason to build something lasting. I love you more today than I did 50 years ago, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today." Clara took his hand, her voice steady despite her emotions. "Dalton gave me my life. That is not an exaggeration. Before him, I was just surviving, just existing from one day to the next. He saw me when I was invisible. He helped me when no one else would. And he loved me when I could not even love myself. These 50 years have been the greatest gift. Every day with you has been a blessing I never take for granted." There was not a dry eye in the church. That evening back at the ranch, Clara and Dalton sat on their porch, surrounded by their children and grandchildren. The youngest grandchild, a little girl of 4 named Clara after her grandmother, climbed into Dalton's lap. "Grandpa, tell us the story," she demanded. "Which story, sweetheart?" "The boot story." Everyone laughed, but Dalton obliged, settling the child comfortably in his arms. "Well, it was the summer of 1882, and I walked into Patterson's General Store in Valentine, Nebraska." Clara listened to her husband tell the story they had told 1,000 times, and she marveled at how he never made himself out to be a hero. He always told it simply, as a man who saw someone in need and decided to help. But to Clara, he would always be her hero, her savior, her love. As the stars came out and the children began to yawn, family members started heading to their various sleeping arrangements. Samuel and his family would stay in the main house. Sarah and hers in the guest house Dalton had built years ago. Soon, Clara and Dalton were alone again, the way they had been so many nights before. "Tired?" Dalton asked. "A little." It was a big day, a good day, the best. They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands like they had since that first day by the creek. The ranch spread out before them in the moonlight, solid and real, a testament to what 2 people could build when they loved each other and worked together. "You know what I think about sometimes," Clara said softly. "I think about Mr. Patterson refusing to pay me my nickel. Being so cruel for no reason. And I wonder if he ever realized that his cruelty led to my greatest blessing. If he had just paid me, I might have left the store before you came in. We might never have met. I would have found you somehow," Dalton said with certainty. "I have always believed that. Some things are meant to be, and us finding each other was one of them." "You really believe that?" "With everything I am." Clara squeezed his hand. "I love you, Dalton Barrett. I love you, Clara Barrett." They sat together under the stars. 2 people who had beaten the odds, who had built a life of meaning and purpose from the humblest of beginnings. Their love story had started with a pair of boots and a wedding ring, but it had grown into something far greater, something that would echo through generations. The seasons turned, and life on the double C continued. Dalton and Clara remained active on the ranch well into their 70s, though they delegated more and more responsibility to Samuel and the capable hands they employed. They spent their days doing the things they loved, working with the horses, tending Clara's expansive garden, and most of all, enjoying their family. When Dalton turned 75, he started having trouble with his heart. The doctor said it was just age, that he should rest more and take things easy. Dalton, stubborn as ever, mostly ignored this advice, though Clara did her best to make him slow down. "I am not going to spend my final years sitting in a rocking chair," he told her. "I have got work to do, horses to train, a wife to love." "You can do all those things at a slower pace," Clara insisted. "I need you around for a long while yet, so you are going to listen to the doctor." Dalton grumbled but complied, at least somewhat. He cut back his hours, took afternoon naps, and let Samuel handle more of the physically demanding work. But he never stopped being involved, never stopped caring about the ranch and the animals and the family he loved. On a crisp autumn morning in 1918, Clara and Dalton celebrated their 60th wedding anniversary. It was a quieter affair than their 50th, just family gathered at the house for a special dinner, but it was no less meaningful. Samuel stood to make a toast, his own hair now graying at the temples. 60 years. It is an incredible accomplishment. You two have shown us what commitment looks like, what real partnership means. You have weathered everything life threw at you and come out stronger. We are blessed to be your children, and we pray for many more years together. Dalton raised his glass, but his hand trembled slightly. Clara noticed and covered his hand with hers, steadying it. "To family," Dalton said. "To love, to the best 60 years a man could ask for." That night, as they prepared for bed, Dalton moved more slowly than usual. Clara helped him with his boots, the same way he had helped her put on her first pair all those decades ago. "Are you feeling all right?" she asked with concern. "Just tired. It was a big day. Let me get you some water." "Clara, wait," he caught her hand. "I need to tell you something." The seriousness in his tone made her heart skip. "What is it?" "I have been thinking lately about how much time we have left. And I know I should not talk about such things, but I need you to know that when my time comes, whenever that is, I will have no regrets. None. You gave me a life beyond my wildest dreams. You gave me purpose and meaning and more love than one man deserves. Whatever comes next, I am at peace because I spent my life with you." Tears filled Clara's eyes. "Do not talk like that. You are going to be around for years yet. I hope so. But if not, I need you to know, I need you to remember, and I need you to promise me that you will be all right. That you will keep living, keep loving, keep being the remarkable woman you are. I cannot promise that. I do not know how to exist without you. You will figure it out, just like you figured out how to survive when you had nothing. You are the strongest person I have ever known. You will be all right." Clara crawled into bed beside him and curled into his arms, the same position they had slept in for 60 years. "I love you so much. I love you too. More than words can say." They fell asleep like that, holding each other close. When Clara woke in the morning, Dalton was still beside her, still holding her hand. But he was gone, passed peacefully in his sleep, his face serene and at rest. The grief was overwhelming. Clara felt like she could not breathe, could not think, could not function. The world without Dalton seemed impossible, wrong, unbearable. But she had made him a promise, and she intended to keep it. They buried Dalton on the ranch he loved, next to Pete and overlooking the creek where he had proposed. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives Dalton had touched. Cowboys who had worked for him, families he had helped, people who had bought his horses or simply known him as a good and decent man. Samuel spoke at the funeral, his voice breaking with emotion. My father taught me many things: how to train horses, how to run a ranch, how to be a man of integrity. But the most important thing he taught me was how to love. He showed me, every single day, what it means to cherish another person, to build a life of partnership and respect. He loved my mother with everything he had, and she loved him the same way. That is the legacy he leaves us. Not the ranch, not the success, but the example of what love should be. Sarah spoke next, tears streaming down her face. My earliest memory is of my father carrying me on his shoulders around the ranch, pointing out everything and explaining how it all worked. He made me feel important, like my questions mattered and my thoughts were valuable. He encouraged me to pursue teaching when most men would have insisted I stay on the ranch. He believed in me, in all of us, and he showed us that kindness is never weakness. I will miss him every day for the rest of my life. Clara could not speak at the funeral. Her grief was too raw, too overwhelming. But she stood beside the grave with her children supporting her, and she said her private goodbye to the man who had been her everything. The weeks and months that followed were the hardest of Clara's life, harder even than those years of poverty and struggle. Because back then, she had hoped for something better. Now, the better thing she had found was gone. But gradually, with the support of her family and the understanding that Dalton would want her to live fully, Clara began to heal. She could not move forward, not really, but she learned to live with the loss. She spent her days working in the garden Dalton had helped her plant, riding out to the creek where they had spent so many hours, and most importantly, spending time with her children and grandchildren. She told them stories about Dalton, making sure his memory stayed alive and vibrant. On what would have been their 62nd wedding anniversary, Clara made a pilgrimage to the general store in Valentine. It had changed hands several times since Mr. Patterson's day, and the current owner was a kind man who knew Clara's story. "Mrs. Barrett, what can I do for you today?" he asked. "I would like to buy a pair of boots, the best you have." He showed her several options, and Clara selected a pair made of fine leather, sturdy and well-crafted. "These are perfect, but I am not keeping them. I want you to watch for someone who needs them, someone who cannot afford shoes. Someone like I used to be. When you see them, give them these boots and tell them the story of how a cowboy's kindness changed a life." The store owner's eyes misted. "I will do that, madam. It will be an honor." Clara also left money with instructions to keep doing this, to always have a pair of boots ready for someone in need. It became a tradition in Valentine, known as the Barrett boots, a way of keeping Dalton's kindness alive. Clara lived for another 7 years after Dalton's death, surrounded by love and family. She got to see her great-grandchildren grow, got to attend Samuel's eldest son's wedding, got to celebrate Sarah's receipt of a teaching award from the state. On a cold February morning in 1925, at the age of 78, Clara passed away peacefully in the same bed where she and Dalton had spent so many years together. She was found with a smile on her face, and those who loved her liked to think she had seen Dalton waiting for her. She was buried beside her husband, their graves overlooking the creek and the land they had built together. The headstone was simple, reading Clara Barrett, beloved wife, mother, grandmother. She walked through poverty into love, and she never forgot the journey. The Double C Ranch continued under Samuel's capable management, and the tradition of the Barrett boots continued in Valentine. Every year on the anniversary of Dalton and Clara's wedding, the family would gather at the ranch to remember the extraordinary love story that had started with such humble beginnings. Years later, when Clara's great-great-granddaughter asked about the boots kept in a special display case in the ranch house, now over 100 years old but carefully preserved, her mother told her the story. Your great-great-great-grandfather bought these boots for your great-great-great-grandmother when she was too poor to afford shoes. He saw her struggling and decided to help, even though he did not know her. That one act of kindness led to love, which led to marriage, which led to this family. Everything we are, everything we have, started with a cowboy who saw someone in need and decided to do the right thing. And it continued because a woman who had been given kindness chose to build a life based on that same principle. So the boots are important, the little girl asked. The boots are everything. They remind us that kindness matters, that one person can make a difference, and that love is the most powerful force in the world. The little girl reached out and gently touched the glass case protecting the boots. I hope I can be kind like that. You can. We all can. That is the lesson they left us. And so the legacy continued, generation after generation, all because a cowboy named Dalton Barrett saw a young woman named Clara Owens struggling to survive and made the simple choice to help. He bought her boots to protect her feet and a wedding ring to claim her heart. And together, they built a love story that would echo through time, a testament to the power of kindness, the strength of love, and the incredible things that can happen when two people choose each other despite all the odds. Their story became legend in Valentine, Nebraska, told and retold until it became part of the town's identity. The Barrett family continued to thrive, carrying forward the values Dalton and Clara had instilled. The ranch remained in the family, growing and adapting with each generation but never losing sight of where it came from. And every year, somewhere in Valentine, someone who could not afford shoes received a pair of boots and heard the story of how a cowboy's kindness changed a life. Because some love stories are too powerful to be contained by a single lifetime, some love stories become eternal, inspiring generations to come to believe in the power of compassion, the strength of commitment, and the transformative magic of choosing to help someone in need. Dalton and Clara's love story was one of those stories. It started with poverty and pain, but grew into something beautiful and lasting. It proved that where you begin does not determine where you end, that love can flourish in the most unlikely circumstances, and that sometimes the simple act of seeing someone, truly seeing them and choosing to care, can change everything. In the end, it was not about the boots or even the wedding ring, though both were symbols of something profound. It was about two people who found each other in a harsh world and chose to build something better together. It was about a man who saw worth where others saw worthlessness, and a woman who had the courage to accept help and transform it into a legacy. Their graves remained on the Double C Ranch, overlooking the creek where Dalton had proposed and the land they had claimed together. And on quiet evenings when the wind blew just right, some said you could still hear the echo of their laughter, the whisper of their love story continuing on long after they had both passed into memory and legend. Because love like theirs never really dies. It transforms, becoming something bigger than the two people who created it. It becomes hope for those who feel hopeless, proof that things can get better for those who are struggling, and inspiration for anyone who has ever wondered if kindness still matters in a hard world. The answer, as Dalton and Clara proved over and over again through 60 years of marriage and a legacy that outlived them both, was yes. Kindness always matters. Love always matters. And sometimes, all it takes is one person willing to buy a pair of boots for someone in need to change the entire trajectory of a life and create a love story that will be remembered for generations to come.